Everyone tells you to buy gold. Everyone tells you to buy Bitcoin. They are selling you the fantasy of a passive survival plan. But history doesn't care about your portfolio. The truth is, in the 5 worst financial crises humanity has ever seen, from the collapse of Byzantium to the modern bankruptcy of Lebanon, 99% of people holding stamped assets lost everything. Only one very specific group didn't lose. They didn't have the most expensive assets, but they had the 5 rules that overcome any currency crisis. And the most important one isn't in your bank or even in your safe. It's in your head. Every generation swears their money is different, that their government's promises are solid, that their currency, be it the dollar, the euro, or whatever comes next, is immune to the inevitable cycle of collapse. But history is never kind to this kind of financial arrogance. The brutal truth is that every great empire, every global superpower, eventually sees its currency turn, at best, into a collector's item, and at worst, into a worthless piece of paper. The most dangerous illusion in finance is not the dream that you will get rich. It is the comforting, poisonous lie that you are secure. If you are watching this video, you have probably already heard the generic, widely sold advice: buy gold, buy silver, buy land, and do not misunderstand me. In the very long run, these tangible assets are undoubtedly the best possible hedge against the government's power to print endless streams of new money. But here's the problem. That is the response of the passive saver. And history shows us, with a devastating pattern of repetition, that being a passive saver, even if you are diligently accumulating real assets, is a strategy doomed to fail. Real survival from a currency collapse demands the complete opposite mindset. It requires a skeptical survivor's mentality. It demands an aggressive, active plan of attack. And that plan is composed of 5 rules that have not failed in 1,000 years of recorded history. These are rules that worked perfectly during the fall of the Byzantine Empire and worked for the few prepared American savers during the 2008 crisis. If you ignore even one of these critical rules, your vault full of shiny gold bars might not be enough to save you when the system finally implodes. The first rule is the most simple, the most brutal, and the most neglected. Zero debt is infinite asset. When money fails, the first thing that absolutely crushes people's lives is not the lack of new money, but the relentless, inescapable demand for old money. In most major currency crises, especially the rapid systemic ones, debt is the executioner's rope around your neck. Consider the catastrophic collapse of the Lebanese dollar that began around 2019. Savers had millions in the bank, in both local currency and in US dollars. But as soon as the collapse was initiated and the banks froze all accounts, the people who were carrying mortgages, business loans, or just heavy credit card balances were completely destroyed. Their life savings suddenly became inaccessible, but their debt, that remained 100% real and enforceable. In a crisis, your creditor does not care that your wealth evaporated overnight. Debt is a nominal value that remains fixed, regardless of how worthless your currency has become. The only theoretical exception is if you were incredibly fortunate enough to be able to repay your debt with hyperinflated, near-worthless currency. But even in that rare scenario, debt imposes a political and social vulnerability that the skeptical survivor simply cannot afford to accept. Debt is a binding promise about the future, and in a total systemic collapse, the future is the only thing you absolutely cannot promise. Eliminating debt is the only hedge that guarantees you a 100% return on your principal, and it is the only asset that the government, the banks, or society can never confiscate from you. But getting out of debt is only the starting point. The second rule is where the vast majority of prepared people make a catastrophic mistake. The second rule is the illusion of passive security versus the power of active, tangible skill. This is the timeless lesson of the Black Death. When the plague ravaged the population of Europe in the 14th century, the actual money, the gold and silver coinage, did not immediately vanish. What disappeared violently was the labor force. Suddenly, blacksmiths, carpenters, competent farmers, and stonemasons became supremely valuable. It did not matter how much gold a nobleman possessed if he could not find a farmer willing to plant his seeds or a skilled builder to repair his castle roof. The wealthiest people after the Black Death were not the passive asset holders. They were the people who possessed tangible, highly necessary production skills. Gold is indeed value, but it is a passive value. If the whole system grinds to a halt, who is going to trade you food for that gold? Money is useless if there is no functioning, trustworthy market in which to spend it. The real currency of a systemic collapse is not gold, it is your skills. In Lebanon, the only people who could bypass the total bank freeze were those who had powerful political connections or those who had significant social influence within their immediate community or their global network, the Lebanese diaspora. The skeptical survivor is not a lonely hermit in a remote bunker. It is a person who has network value, a non-monetary asset that banking institutions and governments can possibly not touch. Your network of trust acts as your final, reliable backstop when the central bank fails and the police stop coming. And the third rule, which introduces the X factor of long-term survival, liquidity and mobility must always outweigh asset fixity. Let's look closely at the Byzantine Empire. For centuries, the solidus gold coin was the undisputed global standard. But as the empire began its long, painful decline, the first thing the government did was what every government eventually does. It began to debase the currency, secretly mixing cheaper copper into the gold. If you were a wealthy citizen with all your wealth tied up in massive land holdings or in colossal statues of solid gold, what happened to you? Your wealth was completely fixed. It could not be moved quickly, and it became an immediate and obvious target for heavy taxation, government confiscation, or outright local plundering. The genuine Byzantine survivor was the astute, flexible merchant who held his wealth in small, high-value assets that could be rapidly moved: jewelry, rare spices, easily exchangeable gold in smaller, more conspicuous denominations, and crucially, who had established trade networks that extended far outside the collapsing imperial borders. The lesson here is simple: gold is good, but mobile gold is infinitely better. Liquidity is not just about having cash, it's about holding assets that can be rapidly converted into usable currency or easily exchanged via barter with the minimal possible friction, and that can be physically moved with you if you are forced to flee a failing system. There is no use in owning a multi-million-dollar building if you suddenly must evacuate the country. The capacity to physically leave a failing system before it completely explodes is your single most valuable insurance policy. Rule 4 is the social rule, which is often dismissed by the purely financial mind. The world's most reliable currency is relationships. This is the point where pure financial skepticism meets harsh social reality. Financial crises are never isolated individual events. They are profound social events. In a systemic crisis, trust is the single most scarce and most valuable asset, and trust only exists and functions within established, reliable networks. Think about the American Civil War. The Confederate money quickly became completely worthless trash. What survived? The closed, tight-knit communities. The unwavering ability of a farmer to trust that the local butcher would feed him and his family, and the butcher trusting that the farmer would in return provide him with crops. This is not a financial transaction. It is a social transaction rooted deeply in reputation and proven reciprocity. And the fifth rule, which ties every other rule together, the focus is not on mere survival, but on post-crisis opportunity. The skeptical survivor is not just trying desperately to avoid dying. They're actively positioning themselves to buy the world cheaply when the systemic collapse inevitably hits rock bottom. Every single major crisis is, at its heart, a massive, violent wealth transfer event. The total wealth of the world is not destroyed, it simply changes hands, typically flowing violently from the weak hands, the unprepared and the trusting, to the strong hands, the prepared and the doubting. The 2008 crisis in the United States is the perfect, chilling modern example. The large, prepared institutional investors did not merely survive, they positioned themselves ruthlessly to buy houses and toxic assets at liquidation prices from the desperate. The same pattern followed the Black Death. The survivors were left with vast amounts of land and a highly valuable, highly paid labor pool. The secret of Rule 5 is having opportunity liquidity. This means more than just being debt-free. It means holding a dedicated liquid reserve, which could be gold, silver, a reliable foreign currency, or even easily stored and bartered commodities that you are psychologically prepared to use to buy real assets like land, key infrastructure, or key businesses at the precise moment when the financial panic is at its absolute peak. Survival is the short-term goal. The long-term, true prize is the generational reallocation of wealth. All of these 5 rules bring us back to the core, essential point, the illusion of security. You are not secure simply because you have a 6-figure bank statement. You are secure because you have cultivated a powerful sense of doubt. You doubt the government's constant promise that everything will be fine. You doubt that the money printer can operate indefinitely without consequence. And, most importantly, you doubt that your gold or your stocks alone are sufficient protection. History is crystal clear on this matter. Money is merely a representation of trust, and trust, by its very nature, is always fragile and easily broken. From the Roman Empire's debasement to the decline of Byzantium, from the Confederate States' worthless paper to the French Revolution's collapsing assignats, the promise of permanence always, inevitably, fails. The stark difference between the skeptical survivor and the naive saver is that one focuses intensely on what absolutely cannot be printed: skills, functional networks, and genuine capacity for production, and the other focuses on what the system actively encourages him to possess: easily taxable, fixed, and easily confiscated paper assets. The crisis is not a destructive end. The crisis is a violent cleansing that reallocates all underlying value. If you are debt-free, you are productive, you are mobile, you have a cultivated network of trust, and you hold a ready reserve for the coming panic, you are not merely preparing to survive. You are actively preparing to inherit the world that is left behind. This is the ultimate lesson that history urgently wants you to learn, and it is a lesson that 99% of wealthy people are actively and arrogantly ignoring. You must stop thinking about pure survival and immediately start thinking about positioning. What crucial, non-monetary steps are you taking right now to ensure that when the currency fails, you are the individual who possesses genuine value in an economy where scarcity has suddenly become the only true currency? The historical answer is definitive. Eliminate all debt. Develop a highly tangible, in-demand skill. Dramatically increase your liquidity and mobility. Cultivate your social network, and then wait patiently and skeptically for the opportunity to buy at fire sale prices. Do not buy a passive asset and pray. Buy a necessary skill and ruthlessly master it. You have now seen the lesson of Byzantium, where gold by itself saved absolutely no one. You have seen modern Lebanon, where high-value dollar deposits were brazenly confiscated. You have seen the Black Death, where all power violently shifted to those who could produce. The true survival plan is a plan of action and active preparedness, not one of lazy, wishful inertia. And the best part of this plan? No government can ever confiscate your tangible ability to fix a generator, or your deep, necessary knowledge of how to grow a garden. No bank or political enemy can ever steal your powerful, established network of trust. The 3 greatest financial mistakes you can commit right now are: 1. Blindly trusting the promise of the state. 2.
Being too fixed and immobile. 3. Carrying high-interest debt. Fix these 3 vulnerabilities immediately, and the inevitable financial collapse will merely be the background noise to your next great investment. If you want to understand how to practically prepare for these existential financial questions, hit the subscribe button now so you do not miss the next videos. And tell me in the comments, what is your most skeptical view on the dollar's future collapse? Don't forget to like and follow the channel.